Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Monday, the 24th of September, 2012. I'm Tony Paniagua. Residents in southern Arizona are trying to tackle a crime wave that is growing around the world, and it's costing its victims millions of dollars in the Tucson area. Thieves are stealing all kinds of metal objects, from swamp coolers and cattle troughs to wires and fence poles. A coalition of different people is raising awareness about this topic and working on a plan of action. For more on that, we are joined by Amber Smith. She is the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Pima Alliance. With her is Lieutenant Tom Early from the Tucson Police Department. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So, Amber, let's begin with how the Metropolitan Pima Alliance got involved in this topic and how big of a problem are we facing here?
Sure. MPA is a land use advocacy organization. We have members in both the public and private sector as we try to bring those two groups together to find compromise, balance, and common ground on different land use and economic issues in the community. Some of my members just started casually talking to each other and discussing different thefts that they've had on their property. Property managers, landowners trying to build subdivisions. And as these folks started just having casual conversation, they said, let's do something about it. So out of that evolved a big task force of about 100 individuals, 9 or 10 different advocacy organizations from across the state. We have all the major utility companies are involved, developers, brokers, property managers, individual homeowners associations, residents, and then just community advocates that want to make a difference here and a positive change.
And how big of a problem is it? You have some national statistics
I do.
As well as Arizona?
The U.S. Department of Energy estimates that this problem annually costs about $1 billion. The state alone, just in 2012 to this date, there's been almost $150 million. And then the city of Tucson has experienced about $2 million in reported damage, which a lot of it goes unreported due to fears of increasing insurance policy costs.
And Lieutenant, how does it typically work? People just show up at a property when it's dark or during the daytime and they help themselves? What happens?
Well, we've seen both, but by and large it's at night. Generally properties that are unoccupied or even abandoned properties. They go in, cut out the wiring, rip the plumbing from the walls, take anything of a valuable metal nature away.
And you brought 4 samples here. Let's talk a little bit about each of those and what they are, and then what does the thief get out of them?
Well, the grouping is sort of representative of the sorts of things that we see commonly stolen. The first one is copper piping or tubing, often taken from both residential and commercial properties, literally ripped from the walls. This large piece of apparatus here is representative of a backflow device that you often see outside of homes and businesses. It's that U-shaped piece of plumbing that comes out of the ground. It's expensive piece of plumbing. It has a lot of brass and copper in it, and it's also easily accessible because it is out of the ground. This is sort of representative of the sorts of large plumbing fittings that would be taken from a commercial site. Again, because it's got a lot of bronze and copper in it, they're valuable. And then lastly is the copper ground cable taken from all sorts of things. This is commercial stuff that was taken from building, but even TEP is losing large caliber or large gauge copper tubing or copper wiring from their substations.
Oh, okay. So, and then Amber, so tomorrow there's a meeting about this topic. What do you hope to accomplish, and can anything be done?
Sure. So tomorrow from 3 to 5 p.m., we're having our first community awareness meeting. The goal is to educate the community on our different efforts. What we've done is divide the problem up into 3 areas: education, enforcement, and electorate. We want to pass some public policies locally and at the state. We want to try to make sure that Lieutenant Early and other officers have the right tools that they need to be able to fight this problem. And then we want to educate the community on being aware of the issue, how they can protect themselves, and then how they can contact 88 Crime whenever something's been stolen from them or if they witness something.
So, Lieutenant, what happens once these items are stolen? Is there a big market out there for them, or do they make a lot of money, or just a little bit of money, these people?
Well, it, of course, depends on the amount of stuff that they steal, but relative to the damage they cause, they're getting a fairly small amount of reward. the damage is usually 8 to 10 times the actual value of the things that were taken. And you referenced the $2 million that the police department estimates have been lost since January 1st of this year. That really was based, and I think you mentioned it, on the value of the things that were stolen, not the actual replacement cost of those items, which can be quite high.
And is there anything that the average person can do to protect their property if you are not there at night and somebody's just going to come over and start taking this stuff?
Well, it frequently isn't just like if you're gone for the evening or a weekend or a week. Not that doesn't occasionally happen. It's properties that are going to be unoccupied for a significant period of time. Or if it's property that has a large quantity of valuable metals on it, lighting, security cameras that are actually usable in terms of identifying the suspects involved. Depending on the value, even 24-hour security where you actually have patrols that check the area, because depending on the cost of the items involved, it would be less expensive than losing them.
Okay. And then, Amber, so you hope everybody has this conversation and keeps it going so that it's raised awareness for everybody?
We do. We've identified several different efforts that have been made across the state to combat this problem. So our goal has been trying to contact those different groups, consolidate it all into our efforts so that we can gain some economies of scale and really try to effectively fight this problem. So we're hoping to raise money to go towards 88 crime, because it's not necessarily the average Joe that we're wanting to call an 88 crime, but sometimes certain criminals will rat each other out just for that benefit. So we're trying to raise money to really incentivize people to really start calling 911 when they're witnessing something out of character.
And I want to follow along that, and we completely support 88 Crime. It's a great organization. They do great work, and this concept is going to be valuable. But one of the things the police department wants to encourage people to do, if they see that sort of behavior or activity in progress, call 911 first. Let us know about it so that we have at least the opportunity to get officers out there and possibly apprehend or prevent what's going on.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. The community conversation tomorrow at the Sheraton Tucson Hotel from 3 to 5 p.m. at 5151 East Grant Road. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The Tucson Unified School District is holding 3 open houses early next month to hear from residents about the district's school master plan, which encompasses issues such as academic achievement and finances. Andrea Kelly has an interview with the district's superintendent.
Joining us in the studio now is John Pedicone, the superintendent of Tucson Unified School District. Thanks for being here today.
It's a pleasure, Andrew.
Now, the district is working on its master plan, working on developing a master plan, a long-term look for the next few years. Tell us briefly a little bit what that plan entails and what you're doing now.
Okay, the board was very, very adamant about making sure we get out to the community and ask for ideas and really kind of discuss the issues that surround what really led to this in the first place, and that's the looming $17 million deficit that's facing us for the 13-14 school year. So there are a lot of possible solutions. The purpose of this process was to get community input, to get not only ideas about how we might close that gap, but also take a look at priorities for how that makes the most sense.
So the district held a series of town halls to provide information and get feedback on the potential different elements in the plan. And now you're moving into a phase where there will be open houses to provide more information to the public. What does that entail? What should people look for if they attend?
Well, as you suggest, the town halls were designed to give us that input we mentioned earlier. Now the open houses, we went back to the governing board and provided them with data from those town halls. They were there for the most part. Most of them were there for either 2 or all 3 of those town halls. Then we established focus groups that were designed to take the information that came out of the town halls, work with it, discuss it, and then try to create some scenarios using the information to mix and match what some of those options to solve this problem might be to address the challenge. Now the open houses are a chance after we go to the board next Tuesday night with kind of a summary of what the focus groups came up with for people in the community to come forward and take a look at what those scenarios are in an open setting. So we're calling those open houses because it'll be much more intimate with the information. People will actually have a chance to go from one group to the other and take a look at what was decided and what was suggested, and then create a kind of a body of information as well that we'll then give back to the governing board before they make any decisions whatsoever on which one or two of those scenarios they want us to proceed with.
Can you give us a few examples of some of the information in the scenarios? We know people have heard about school closures. Other specifics that people might be weighing when you look at these plans?
Yeah, interestingly, in every case, in all five of the groups, school compression or closure came up, and consolidation came up as one of the top two suggestions. And then the other big top one was reducing administrative costs, which makes sense since that's the overall philosophy was keep the cuts away from the classroom, which we would support as well, of course. Then it's a question of how you do that. So I can say without hesitation that the top two were consolidation and cutting administrative costs. That really requires a good look at what that really means, because when we talk about either one of those two things, we've got to make those decisions and suggestions very, very carefully.
And we should frame this discussion. It sort of hinges on what happens with Proposition 204, a proposition on the ballot in November statewide that has to do with education funding. You mentioned the $17 million deficit in the district's budget. Can you explain what that looks like in relation to that proposition?
Okay. As you know, we can't do anything to influence the outcome of an election, so we can't give you an opinion about whether we believe 204 is a positive thing or not. But I can tell you what it would mean in terms of the data and what we believe 204 will generate. We know that part of the proposition is to create a spending floor, which is important because it basically says that the amount that's budgeted per student will be equal to whatever was budgeted in 11-12 or 12-13, whichever is greater. So in that case, there'll be a spending floor, and then on top of that, there'll be X number of dollars by most people's accounting, and this is the Arizona school business officials, as well as the crafters of the proposition. It means approximately $600 per student. So for a district of 50,000 students, it'll mean to us about $30 million. That will more than cover the deficit itself of $17 million, but that doesn't change the importance of examining the information that we've been going through to determine whether or not, on a long-term basis, the same issues need to be addressed and confronted. It just means we won't have to do that in a crisis, more than likely. So that's the idea. It'll mean about that to the district, if that makes sense.
So just to reiterate, if Proposition 204 were to fail, there would be the $17 million deficit for TUSD.
That's correct. And it may also mean more than that, depending on what the legislature chose to do in terms of making up for the 1 cent sales tax that sunsets at the end of this year.
Okay. Thank you for explaining some of that.
Sure.
And what's the overall timeline on this master plan for TUSD and what to do next, short and long term? When do you think there'll be a final discussion or decision?
Well, everything that we're doing is targeting toward decisions by the governing board to at least be in a position to make them by the end of October, middle of November. Because there's a board election coming up, and I think everybody knows there are 3 slots open. If the same board were to be reelected, then we would have a little bit of an easier time making decisions for the long term. If it turns out to be a different board, either different by means of one board member or more, then I think the board would have to consider whether or not decisions they're going to make now would be the decisions that they want to make, knowing that there may be a change of board. So we're going to be getting the information to the governing board by November for a decision to be made by the middle to the end of the month. And part of the reason for our concern regarding that is that if we are going to do anything that's going to be dramatic, it's going to, in terms of either closure or other possibilities, we need to get that information to the community quickly.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us. That's all the time we have on this right now. Appreciate it, John Pedicone.
Thank you.
Reading to a dog may sound like a strange or comical idea, but a program in Pima County's libraries is using this method to help children improve their education and confidence. Fernanda Echavarri explains.
To eat the zebras called Daphne.
5-year-old Ben Walsh is a regular at the Himmel Park Library.
To help with dizzy animals.
His mom says Homer the dog has a lot to do with the little boy's love of reading and his advanced skills. Ben, like many other kids, visits public libraries throughout Pima County to participate in the Read to a Dog program, where kids can sit next to a therapy dog and read to it.
Well, the program is designed to provide an opportunity for children to have a stress-free environment to enjoy reading. And It's meant to be a kind of a relaxing and fun opportunity so that as they're reading, they don't feel that there's judgment. And so they feel more comfortable, and then as they feel more comfortable, their confidence level increases.
Darby says many kids feel embarrassed to read out loud, but when reading to a dog who is always listening and never judging, the fear and embarrassment go away. Beth Rubio is the librarian at the Himmel branch. She says throughout the years, she has seen many success stories with this program.
One particular child was really struggling, and the mom would come to me and say, well, how can we improve her reading? She's, just very uncomfortable with it. And I said, well, why don't you bring her to read to the dog, and let's see if that would help make her feel a little more at ease and a little more comfortable. So the child came, and she started coming when she was about 6, and she's now 8. And she's a fluent reader and loves to read and comes in weekly to check out.
Originally, she thought the program would be for 2nd or 3rd graders who were struggling with reading. But Rubio says it attracts kids of all ages.
You want to read a story?
Toddlers would go over and find a board book, and they'd sit down and they'd yammer away like they were reading. They'd turn the pages. The book might be upside down. It doesn't matter. The dog doesn't care, and the child doesn't know any better. But it's all part of learning how to read. So it's just been a beautiful experience all the way around.
Connor Latimer is 7 years old. He's at the library with his younger sister Lily and their mother.
I was reading to the dog. I was thinking I was going to do homework first, but instead I did the dog first.
Connor says he has always been around dogs and enjoys reading to Homer.
I like animals, and this is baby animals, and I like platypuses and donkeys a lot, so I chose to read this book.
This is not Connor's first time reading to a dog. In fact, when he got home after reading to Homer last time, he tried to read to his own dog, but it just wasn't the same.
He keeps chasing me around the yard when I try to read him.
There are more than a dozen dogs involved in the program at 11 branches of the Pima County Public Libraries. Most of them are assigned to a specific library branch.
They're all shapes, sizes, colors, and hairstyles. And so there's a dog for every child.
Here, many kids know Homer the dog by name.
Hi, my name is Judy Christensen, and I am the handler for Homer, who is a therapy dog. You want to roll over on your back? Homer is a rescue from the local animal shelter. I volunteer there, and he came in as a stray and sat in a kennel for about 5 weeks. Nobody looked at him, nobody took him out, and he just sat back and watched people go by. And one day I decided that he'd been there long enough, and I took him home.
As Christensen got to know Homer, she realized he would make a great therapy dog. Like other therapy dogs in the Read to a Dog program, Homer is calm, he is interested in people, and is able to focus on a child no matter what distractions might be around him. Christensen says coming to the library once a week with Homer is rewarding for both, the dog and her.
I like to see the children, and to me it's like a family. I enjoy watching Homer interact with the children. I'm glad to be able to do something in the community.
Lily was one of about 5 kids that read to Homer. Most of them read an entire book.
He likes it. He doesn't care if I don't know the words. Holding up another gold coin. Wait a minute.
The University of Arizona Humanities Seminars program offers a wide range of courses about some intriguing subjects every semester, and they are all designed with adult learners in mind. Organizers are still accepting enrollment for many of the 4 to 10 week courses that are happening this fall, as you will learn from Mark McLemore and his guests.
And joining me now are 2 men with experience as instructors in the Humanities Seminar Series. We've got Tom Miller and Richard Poss joining us. Thank you for being here. So tell me, Richard, about your involvement with Humanities Seminars. I understand you've been on the board for some time.
I have. My first seminar was in '94, and I found it to be an extraordinary experience. Normally when you're teaching undergraduates or graduate students, you have a particular kind of structure and a particular set of expectations. And it was a real revelation to go into a humanities seminar. It was really quite different. For example, in my first seminar, I asked, how many of you have been to Stonehenge? And normally, one or two hands would go up, and when I did it in the seminar, they all went up. How many of you have been to Chaco Canyon? They all went up. How many of you have been to the pyramids? All hands. I was staggered. You really have to get a new game going to do the seminars. It was really it's a completely different kind of experience. There's no attendance, there's no quizzes, there's no exams, no papers. They're there for the ideas. They're there for the meat. And so you go in having read a text, and you hash out these ideas, and it was very stimulating. It's a great way for a professor to recharge batteries, I think, to do something like that.
Well, outline what the format for these seminars takes.
Well, the classic format is 3 hours in the morning, 9 to 12, and it's 1 day a week for 10 weeks. But now we've branched out. We offer more seminars and different times. We have some 4-week, 5-week seminars. But you have time. The professor will come in and present for about an hour and a half. And then there will be a break and people will talk, and then there's questions. And the questions can come from anywhere. Once we were talking about the early history of rocketry, for example, and I mentioned some personality problems that were attendant on the administration of Wernher von Braun. And someone raised their hand, and the person said, "You're right, he was like that when I worked with him." I mean, it was really mind-blowing for me to work with those kinds of people. They often have direct experience with the things that I'm talking about. It's amazing.
Well, Tom, share with us your perspective on this. What are the benefits of the humanities seminars format from where you stand?
Well, from a professor's perspective, it's just exciting to be in the classroom with that much experience. I teach rhetoric classes, and I've done 19th century rhetoric and 20th century rhetoric, and you have a classroom full of experience of literally a lifetime of political campaigns and reading, really thoughtful folks. And many of them are retired professionals from around the country, so they're sometimes meeting each other in the classroom and forming the community there. And they become a big part of the seminar, so that the discussion that goes on from week to week is really important.
Well, tell us about the course that you'll be instructing this fall, and how many weeks will this course be?
The seminars tend to be either a 4-week format or a 10-week format, and they tend to be either 2 hours or 3 hours, meeting once a week without exams, as Richard said, or writing assignments, that kind of thing. Some of them are more reading intensive. There's been a class in Melville or in Joyce. Others of them are less reading centered classes in Broadway film or Broadway shows. And in my class, it'll be centered a lot on the political campaign, the current political campaign. We'll be reading books about political philosophy and political history. There's other courses this fall that'll be centered on bugs, everything from bugs to the Roman culture and Roman archaeology, Greek archaeology, as a matter of fact.
Well, Richard, tell us about the course that you'll be instructing.
I'll be doing one in the history of astronomy, and we'll be taking selected episodes from the history of astronomy and then delving into the issues. Stonehenge is a good example. We'll review the history of Stonehenge, but also look at very recent excavations and the way in which it's considered today by different perspectives.
Well, share with us quickly, what's the key significance of Stonehenge in relation to astronomy, do you think?
Well, it is, I would say historically, it actually is responsible for the creation of the field of archaeoastronomy as we know it, because of the controversial overstatements of a book called Stonehenge Decoded that came out in the late 60s. And that book was a real mind-blowing text because it claimed that Stonehenge was not only oriented toward the midsummer sunrise, which everybody knows, but that using the Aubrey holes and the different site points, you could use it to predict lunar eclipses, to do everything. And of course, these claims were overblown and no one believes them now. But what it got everyone doing was looking back into prehistory, thinking, well, there's a stone circle outside of town, or there's some petroglyphs over there, and there's a sun watching station. Let's go see if any of these things really are aligned and discover what prehistoric cultures knew about astronomy. And so it had the effect of, in a sense, it's the planetary logo for archaeoastronomy.
and a field that is ripe with the kind of discussion material that you were talking about
Absolutely.
earlier.
There are amazing monuments just within an hour's drive of Tucson in the archaeoastronomical world.
And Tom will have no trouble with discussion periods either, dealing with politics, I assume.
Yes, we have. It's really exciting to be able to step back from the soundbite politics of the current election and be able to reflect upon, well, how has the media's involvement in politics changed? In the first week, we'll look at the Lincoln-Douglas debates, talk about what debates were like before the era of print, mass print, and then we'll talk about the Kennedy-Nixon debates and looking at those. You can talk about politics in a great deal of depth using rhetorical analysis of how do people think, what are their assumptions, what are their purposes, how do conservatives think, how do liberals think, and you can analyze that without having to get into, well, do you agree with the politician on this or that point?
Well, let's say that enrollment is still open for many of these courses, and people can find out more online. Thank you both for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In tonight's video postcard from photographer and editor Jay Blaine, we bring you some sights and sounds from the BMX Southwest Nationals, which were held in Tucson last month. You can get more news and information on our website, azpm.org. To comment on any story you saw tonight, click on it online and go to the bottom. We can also be reached via Facebook and Twitter. Coming up tomorrow night, what may have sounded like an improbable goal has turned into a growing business in Arizona. We'll talk about the wine industry in the state. An expert explains Proposition 121, which would change our elections in Arizona. And you'll learn about the Musicians Museum in Tucson. I'm Tony Paniagua. From all of us at Arizona Public Media, have a great night.